That night, unlike any other, I was washing the dishes, enjoying the rare silence when my husband went out, and I felt a warm breath right behind me. I didn't hear the door open, no footsteps, just him, standing there, so close. My husband's friend. He didn't say anything. He didn't touch me. But I felt him there, the silence stretched. Then he whispered, "You felt it too, right?" I should have left, but I stood still, and that was the moment everything changed. My name is Emma Carter, 32 years old, living in a small house in Brooklyn, New York, with my husband, Daniel. My kitchen glowed with a warm light from the pendant light above the sink. The sound of running water as I dipped my hands in the warm, soapy water, the feeling of comfort spreading through my fingers. Everything was strangely quiet tonight, a rare silence that I rarely had. Daniel had just left. He said he was going to stop by the grocery store on Atlantic Avenue to pick up a few things for breakfast tomorrow. I didn't ask, just nodded and continued with the remaining dishes. I loved this time anyway. When the house was mine alone, no TV noise, no constant chatter, just peaceful silence and the steady sound of running water. I sighed in relief, letting the warmth of the water soak into my skin, soothing the aches and pains of the day. My movements became rhythmic, almost meditative. Pick up the plate, scrub it clean, rinse it under the faucet, place it on the rack. Repeat. A simple, yet peaceful sequence. Outside the window, the streetlights cast a hazy glow on the wet pavement, reflecting pale yellow streaks across the glass. In the distance, the sound of honking horns echoed off the busy street, reminding me that the city never truly slept. I closed my eyes for a moment, savoring the last moment of silence before Daniel returned, before life resumed. But then, just when I thought I was completely alone, a sudden chill crept down my spine. I hadn't heard the door open, but there was some inexplicable feeling that made me freeze for a moment. A presence, right behind me. My body stiffened. Instinct told me that someone was standing right behind me. My breath caught in my throat as a scent flooded my senses, the faint scent of sandalwood and tobacco. So familiar. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Lucas Hale. Daniel's best friend since college. I clenched the wet plate in my hand, trying to keep myself calm. Reason tells me that maybe I'm just overreacting. Maybe Lucas just stopped by. Maybe he just wanted to say hello. But if that's the case, why didn't I hear his footsteps? Why was he standing so close that I could feel the warmth of his body against my back? I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to remain calm. "What are you doing here, Lucas?" I heard a low, soft chuckle against the back of my neck. A shiver ran down my spine. "Just wanted to look at you." I frowned. The answer was vague, unclear. I continued washing the dishes, trying to pretend I wasn't aware of his every breath, his every movement. But the silence that stretched between us was uncomfortable. It was heavy, thick, like an invisible string tightening the space around us. His eyes. I didn't look, but I could feel it, like a sharp blade sliding across my skin. "You're so quiet for someone who just walked in." I tried to keep my voice calm, but even I could hear the strain in it. "Didn't want to bother you." The sarcasm was hidden in every word. I bit my lip, gripping the edge of the sink. The water, still running, but I couldn't feel its warmth anymore. Lucas shifted. It was just a small movement, but enough for me to realize that the distance between us had changed. He came closer. I turned my head a little, enough to catch his image in my peripheral vision. The pale yellow light from the kitchen. Lamp cast sharp shadows and light on Lucas's face. His eyes locked on mine. Black, silent, filled with something unreadable. And then, a slow smirk tugged at the corners of his lips, as if he knew something, that I didn't. I clenched my fists. A knot of unease twisted in my stomach, a kind of silent warning in my mind. I didn't like this. Didn't like the way Lucas was looking at me. Didn't like the way he was standing so close. Didn't like the thick air that hung in the kitchen. I cleared my throat, trying to control my breathing. "Where's my husband?" I asked, my voice light. But there was no hiding the tension in each word. Lucas shrugged, still smiling. "Still out?" He paused, tilted his head. "Thought you might need someone to be with." My stomach clenched. Not the words themselves, but the way he said them. Like he knew exactly what each word would do to me. Like he was testing me. I swallowed, trying to relax my body. "I don't need anyone. I'm just washing dishes." My voice was a little harder. Lucas leaned against the counter, his arms crossed over his chest, his eyes never leaving mine. "Do you always work this hard?" I forced a smile, trying to keep things light. Someone has to clean up after dinner. But Lucas didn't smile. Instead, he tilted his head, his gaze slowly tracing over my face as if assessing something. "I don't think Daniel appreciates you enough." I froze. I turned my head completely, my eyes meeting his. "What?" Lucas didn't answer right away. He just looked at me, deep and penetrating, as if searching for something inside me. When he spoke, his voice was lower, a hidden sharpness behind it. "He leaves you alone too much." The air in the kitchen felt thick. I gripped the sink handle, trying to keep my breathing normal. This was a boundary, a fragile boundary that had just been pushed to its limit. I could feel it in the air. And Lucas. He knew it too. I turned back to the sink, trying to ignore the tension that coiled in my chest. The water was still running, the steady murmur a reminder that I was here, in my own kitchen, with nothing to worry about. Just a normal conversation. Just Lucas. But I couldn't ignore the feeling of his presence hovering just behind me, closer than necessary. Then he shifted again, not touching me, but close enough that I could feel his warmth through the thin fabric of my shirt, invisible but impossible to ignore. I clenched my jaw. Part of me wanted to turn around, to face him, to make it clear that he should leave now. But another part, a deeper, more dangerous part, told me that I shouldn't move. Because if I moved, if I looked at him, I would have to admit something. I didn't know which would be worse. After a long moment, I heard Lucas speak. "You should stop." His voice was low and slow, as if each word had been carefully chosen to fall into the space between us with an invisible weight. I froze. "Stop what?" I tried to keep my voice steady, but it wasn't as steady as before. Lucas didn't answer right away. I could feel his eyes moving along the back of my neck, considering something. Then he took a step back. The sudden distance was strangely jarring. "Okay," he said, his voice unreadable. "See you later." I exhaled, not realizing I'd been holding my breath the whole time. I heard his footsteps echo through the quiet house. A moment later, the front door closed. He was gone. I stood there, staring at the water running into the sink, trying to steady my breathing. But no matter how hard I tried, the feeling of his presence remained. And I knew, deep down, that this wouldn't be the last time I'd feel him behind me. I clenched my fists. A strange feeling welled up in my chest, something that wasn't fear but also not quite safety. I thought it was over. I was wrong. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps. Slow, cautious, coming back. I spun around, my heart racing. Part of me hoped to see Daniel. Maybe he'd forgotten something and come back to get it. But no. It was Lucas. He stood in the doorway, his tall figure casting a shadow on the floor. His eyes didn't leave me, unwavering. No hesitation. No regrets. I swallowed. Why are you still here? Lucas didn't answer right away. He stepped inside, slamming the door behind him, slowly, deliberately. I flinched at the sound. Lucas tilted his head, his eyes dark, his voice light but dangerous. You forgot something. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too claustrophobic. I knew I should run away now. But my feet wouldn't move. You should go, Lucas. My voice was harder than before, but I wasn't sure if it was strong enough to drive him away. A slow smile spread across his lips. Not exactly cheerful, but lazy and knowing. You feel it too, don't you, Emma? I took a breath, feeling the line between us completely blur. Lucas stepped closer, slowly. Moderation, until there was only a breath between us. He trusts you, he whispered, his breath fanning my cheek. Maybe too much. I gripped the edge of the counter. My control was slipping. The air between us was as thick as an undiscovered secret. I felt Lucas's hand brush my arm just barely. A delicate touch, but enough to send a jolt of electricity down my spine. I should have pushed him away. I should have said something. Instead, I just stood still. His lips hovered dangerously above mine, waiting. And then, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Reality hit like a bucket of cold water. I froze. So did Lucas. We both realized what had almost happened. I pushed him away, breathing hard. Go. Now. Lucas looked at me for a long moment, his eyes dark, but he didn't protest. He backed, away. One last look. Then he disappeared through the back door. My hands shook as I pressed them to my chest, trying to slow my frantic heartbeat. A few seconds later, the front door opened. Daniel walked in, completely unaware of what had happened. Baby, I got everything we need. I took a breath, forcing myself to turn around, hiding everything that had just happened. Daniel set the bags on the counter, wrapped his arms around my waist, and pressed a kiss to my temple. Are you okay? You look a little flushed. I swallowed, nodding quickly. Yeah, it's probably just the steam. Daniel laughed. I told you not to overwork yourself. I tried to laugh along, but as I helped him unpack, I could still feel the ghost of his touch lingering on my skin. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I knew. This isn't the end. This is just the beginning. I tried to control my breathing as I helped Daniel unpack the groceries. My heart was still beating faster than normal, and every time my hands accidentally touched the cold cardboard box or the smooth surface of a milk bottle, I flinched, as if they might melt the fragile shell I was trying to hold on to. Daniel didn't notice anything unusual. He laughed about something, maybe the new neighbors, or a random story he heard on the radio while driving. I nodded, chuckling at the appropriate times, but my mind couldn't leave what had just happened. Lucas. His silence, his presence, the way he stood so close, the way his eyes locked on me as if he knew how I would react before I knew it myself, and worst of all, the way my body had betrayed me. Nothing had happened. Not really. I'd pushed him away, I'd told him to go. But what if Daniel's car hadn't come calling right then? What if I hadn't had a reason to stop? The thought made my stomach twist. I didn't want to think about it, but it stuck with me, seeping into every corner of my mind like an indelible stain. Daniel reached out and hugged me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. Are you sure you're okay? I stiffened for a moment before forcing myself to relax into his arms. Yeah. Just tired. Daniel kissed my neck lightly before turning back to put the things in the fridge. I stood there, watching him busily arrange everything neatly, completely oblivious. He trusted me. He trusted Lucas. I bit my lip, guilt rising like a tidal wave. I didn't do anything wrong. But would that still be true? If a small part of me hadn't wanted Lucas to leave right then? I couldn't answer. In the days that followed, I tried to forget everything. I pretended it never happened, like the touch on my wrist was just an illusion, like Lucas's breath right next to my lips wasn't enough to make me feel the danger of it. But the thing was, I couldn't. The way I felt his presence before I even saw him, the way he knew exactly what I was thinking, all of it made it impossible to erase him from my mind. And Lucas wouldn't let me forget. He wouldn't. Nothing. But that made me even more uneasy. Every time I went to the grocery store, I felt like someone was watching me. Every time I passed the coffee shop near my house, I felt someone's eyes on me from across the street. And one night, as I stood in the kitchen pouring water, I felt it before I even saw him. My heart sank. I knew where he was. I looked up and saw Lucas standing right outside the kitchen window, in the dark. The streetlights were just enough to make out the outline of his face, his eyes sharp, the corners of his mouth slightly turned up, as if he knew exactly what I was feeling right then.